Ilstead Museum in Farmington is an important cultural and recreational resource within easy reach of all the cities and towns in central Connecticut. Ilstead Museum is a place where art and nature flourish together, just as the family that designed this estate intended. Ilstead is a colonial revival house built at the turn of the 20th century and maintained just as it was when the family that built it lived here. Ilstead is their outstanding art collection. Ilstead is 150 acres of fields, trails, and scenic views. Ilstead is May Market and other seasonal events. Ilstead is also a beautiful sunken garden, the site of the annual Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. This program and the ones that follow are an invitation to attend this summer's series of poetry and music events.
The 26th season of the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival features Irish poetry and music on opening night, Sunday, May 27th, featuring Eamon Grennan and David McLaughlin. On Wednesday, June 20th, we welcome co-headliners Margaret Gibson and Molly Brown. On Wednesday, July 11th, Ilstead Museum is pleased to present the current United States Poet Laureate, Tracy K. Smith. Opening for Tracy K. Smith is the winner of the Sunken Garden Poetry Prize, Sean Ballard. On Wednesday, July 25th, is The Poetry of Our World, featuring co-headliners Solmaz Sharif and Javier Zamora. On Sunday, August 5th, is Closing Night with Young Poets Day, featuring Andrea Gibson with Fresh Voices student competition winners. People love the informality and outdoor setting of this festival. You can bring lawn chairs or blankets, pack a picnic, or buy dinner and wine from the vendors here. There's an hour of live music first, anything from jazz to folk to classical, and then you can hear some of the best poets in the country read poetry that is relevant and accessible. One of the country's leading poetry events, the festival introduces audience to U.S. and state poets laureate, Pulitzer Prize winners, and other major American poets in the intimate, informal setting of this historic garden. The festival's ongoing popularity is evidence that poetry still holds an important place in American culture, and that poetry has a unique power to remind us of our own common humanity.
My first piece is about a Greek myth, Eurydice, in which she gets married, and as she steps out of the chapel, she steps on a snake and dies. Her husband then tries to appeal to Hades to get her back, and they make a deal that he can't look at her until they leave the underworld. He has both feet out, turns around, she hasn't left, and she disappears. Eurydice. She always stood on the heels of a snake with poison in her veins. Months of becoming a needlepoint at the fangs of a monster made her numb to the hope that the cycle might end, that maybe she could escape the darkness she knew as her home. She knew that the future stood between the man, the light, and herself, but she did not see the promise in her departure, this aging man and the wind behind her. Freedom was not something good anymore. Rather, it was like stripping a bolt, taking its purpose, and trying to use it again to piece back together a body bitten one too many times.
My next poem, I guess a little background on it. My parents grew up in Albania under a dictatorship, and there was a civil war and just bad stuff, all the bad stuff. And they came to the U.S. 2 years before I was born, and they inspired this poem. Afterbirth. The women with the nation in their wombs grab at our collars. Have you seen my son? The wild one, the handsome one, the jailed one, the freed one. On, and still no one. Gunshots echo in their rib cages, shrapnel where their sons once pressed against. There is no why, we tell the mourners, the mothers, the ones we ask to build the hearth, stoke the coals, and pray the spark won't catch. There is no why, we say, and still it continues.
My second poem is called Ghazal for Fishing Off Walker Pond, about feeling more remorse for hooking worms than for actually killing the fish when I was camping. Sing of 5 fish and 20 worms, all dead. God sees eyeless with Hess's gaze of light. Placid lavender, speared like Sebastian, worm slickly rainbow in the baby light. Coins burn a hole in my pocket tonight, mourning for annelids who complain in light. Mathematic animal grief and writhing, my pen scratches beneath a hanging light. The docile worm rolls in agonized doom, mouthless protest gives death a name in light. O non-denominational roundness, I praise you over fish in sideways light. Wedge, axle, uncomplicated, ancient, sunfish ghost machines twisting in day's light. I suffered to find scales left within the bags under my eyes in a haze of light. My heart was caked with pondside scum and grime. This was a gift from worms renamed as light. What's cruel is not in whether worms can feel or comprehend. See if intent was light. And if you can't absolve a man of this crime with his sorry, by poetry, raise light.
This next one is called Origami. It is about identity, and it is about theft, and it is about the two of those words together. I used to be really good at origami. See, I could fold the truth. They told me I was a spider because I could spin one hell of a web of lies. In discussion, repercussions never scared me because by the next morning I'd have a new name. Not my name. I can't remember that one now. My identities were plentiful. I could release them like paper cranes into the wind, just to be littered onto the streets, forgotten, invisible. I folded the photographs from my childhood. My 6th birthday party soon became a butterfly. My first day of kindergarten, a fox. The images had no sentiment attached. They never really felt like they belonged to me. They didn't. I claimed someone else's childhood memories as my own because I wanted to be the little girl with the frosting-stained dress and the pigtails, running around her backyard with a party hat. Crushed underfoot, they lay, crumpled next to cigarette butts and loose change, softened by rain. People noticed, but no one ever did anything to help. No one ever did anything to help me or the past me, the me that was you or, could have been, the me that took victims, all of the me's that weren't who they should have been. I wasn't who I should have been. Crushed underfoot, I lay, with soft soil beneath my hair to support the weight of my skull, hardened by experience. No one has noticed that I released the cranes.
And my last poem is inspired by a true story. It's called Kalba. I recently learned that the Hebrew word for body is goof, like a joke, like a body is something made for laughing. But once you make the word feminine, goof to goofa, it becomes a corpse. I learned this the same day that I learned Bruno Fernandes de Sousa, Brazilian goalkeeper, had just been signed by Boa Esporte after serving just 7 years of a 22-year sentence for murdering Eliza Samujo, his girlfriend, who had dared to demand child support for a child she claimed came from the goof of Susa. So he conspired with 9 others to torture her, murder her, dismember her, and feed the gufa to his dogs. In Hebrew, Kalev is a dog. The feminine, kalba, is a bitch. It does not matter whether Susa's dogs were male or female, they were Kalvim, Eliza, the kalba. Eliza Samujo reminds us that an open mouth, the necessary unlocked jaw for an additional can transform a woman into a bitch, a woman into a corpse. My God tells me to shout praise with open lips, so I pray in Hebrew, loudly, to drown out the fear of a body in the process of losing its tongue. Thank you.
And although this is my first time here at Sunken Garden, after immigrating from Vietnam, my family and I grew up in Hartford. And so this is home. It's good to be home. Right on Franklin Avenue. I want to start with this poem here. My mother, because of the war in Vietnam, her education was interrupted, and she ended up living most of her life, the rest of all of her life, illiterate. And I wrote this poem imagining what she would say if she could write a poem. So it's in her imagined voice. And the funny thing about this is, nearly 10 years ago, I won this little prize called the Al Savard Award from the Connecticut Poetry Society. And the gentleman who was so kindly picked the poem was John Stanisi, who was here tonight. And we didn't realize that until we met each other in the back. And I never met him until now. And so thank you, John, for being such an early believer. Head first. Don't you know? A mother's love neglects pride, the way fire neglects the cries of what it burns. My son, even tomorrow you will have today. Don't you know? There are men who touch breasts as they would the tops of skulls. Men who carry dreams over mountains, the dead on their backs. But only a mother can walk with the weight of a second beating heart. Stupid boy. You can get lost in every book, but you'll never forget yourself the way God forgets his hands. When they ask you where you're from, tell them your name was fleshed from the toothless mouth of a war woman, that you were not born, but crawled head first into the hunger of dogs. My son, tell them the body is a blade that sharpens by cutting. Thank you. This poem has a little epigraph from one of my favorite poets, Emily Dickinson. Being at Amherst now, I always feel her presence. It's a poem to my future son, whoever he may be. The stars are not hereditary. Emily Dickinson. There was a door, and then a door, surrounded by a forest. Look, my eyes are not your eyes. You move through me like rain heard from another country. Yes, you have a country. Someday they will find it while searching for lost ships. Once I fell in love during a slow motion car crash. We looked so peaceful, the cigarette floating from his lips as our heads whiplashed back into the dream, and all was forgiven. Because what you heard or will hear is true. I wrote a better hour onto the page and watched the fire take it back. Something was always burning. Do you understand? I closed my mouth but could still taste the ash because my eyes were open. From men, I learned to praise the thickness of walls. From women, I learned to praise. If you are given my body, put it down. If you are given anything, son, be sure to leave no tracks in the snow. Know that I never chose which way the seasons turned, that it was always October in my throat, and you, every leaf refusing to rust. Quick, can you see the red dark shifting? This means I am touching you. This means you are not alone, even as you are not. If you get there before me, if you think of nothing and my face appears rippling like a torn flag, turn back. Turn back and find the book I left for us, filled with all the colors of the sky, forgotten by gravediggers. Use it. Use it to prove how the stars were always what we knew they were, the exit wounds of every misfired word. Thank you. And just going to close with this poem. Thank you again for having me. One of my favorite poets, Frank O'Hara, had this line in his poem called Katie. And he says, "Someday I'll love Frank O'Hara." And I thought it was such an honest and courageous thing to say. And so I wrote a poem to myself called "Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong." Someday I'll love Ocean Vuong. Ocean, Don't be afraid. The end of the road is so far ahead. It is already behind us. Don't worry. Your father is only your father until one of you forgets. Like how the spine won't remember its wings, no matter how many times our knees kiss the pavement. Ocean, are you listening? The most beautiful part of your body is wherever your mother's shadow falls. Here's the house with childhood whittled down to a single red tripwire. Don't worry. Just call it horizon, and you'll never reach it. Here's today. Jump. I promise it's not a lifeboat. Here's the man whose arms are wide enough to gather your leaving. And here the moment, just after the lights go out, when you can still see the faint torch between his legs. How you use it again and again to find your own hands. You asked for a second chance and are given a mouth to empty out of. Don't be afraid. The gunfire is only the sound of people trying to live a little longer and failing. Ocean, ocean, get up. The most beautiful part of your body is where it's headed. And remember, loneliness is still time spent with the world. Here's the room with everyone in it. Your dead friends passing through you like wind through a wind chime. Here's a desk with the gimp leg and a brick to make it last. Yes, here's a room so warm and blood close. I swear you will wake and mistake these walls for skin. Thank you.
I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. I just know it's gonna work out right. Sitting here, kicking back with my friends, thinking about the good life. I hope that it won't end. I don't know just where I'll go, not sure yet, I need to know. And I don't know what I'll find, guess I'll find out in all good time. Just sitting here, kicking back with my friends, I hope that it won't end.